Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Viswaprajna channel for another reading of the book Western Philosophy 101 book, Sophie's World. So, today uh, we are going to be doing the 25th reading or the 25th episode of the reading of this book. And we, in the 24th episode, we finished Kierkegaard and his philosophy. Today, we are going to be looking at one of the key shapers of European and even I would arguably world history. His name is Marx, basically, and the chapter name is called Marx. A specter is haunting Europe. And for anybody who has the PDF, it is page number 24. If you want to follow on, either now or later. Okay, and in the panel, we have been joined by Sikshadin Garu. Sikshadin Garu,
Sir,
thank you
good morning, sir.
for joining.
Good morning.
Good morning, good evening. I hope all is well with you.
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, and
Everything's fine, sir. How are you doing, sir?
perfect. I'm doing all right. So, without much further delay, we'll get into the chapter because I'm also curious what Jostein has to say about Marx. So,
Sure, sir.
I'll get started and then you can join a little bit later, all right? After a
All
few
right, sir.
pages. Okay. So,
Okay.
Kierkegaard and then now Marx. A spectre is haunting Europe. Hilda got up her bed and went to the window facing the bay. When she had started to read this Saturday, it was still Sophie's 15th birthday. The day before had been Hilda's own birthday. If her father had imagined that she would get as far as Sophie's birthday yesterday, he had certainly not been realistic. She had done nothing but read all day long. But he was right that there would only be one more birthday greeting. It was when Alberto and Sophie had sung happy birthday to her. Very embarrassing, Hilda thought. And now, Sophie had invited people to a philosophical garden party on the very day her father was due back from Lebanon. Hilda was convinced something would happen that day, which neither she nor her father were quite sure of. But one thing was certain before her father got home to Jerkly with a B, Jerkly, he would get to a scare. That was the least she could do for Sophie and Alberto, especially after they had appealed for help. Her mother was still down in the boathouse. Hilda ran downstairs to the telephone. She found Anne and Ole's number in Copenhagen and called them. Anne Wamsdahl. Hi, this is Hilda. So somebody picked up and said, Hi, this is Anne Wamsdahl with a K in the front. I'm not very good at pronouncing these Nordic names. Hi, this is Hilda. Oh, how are you? How are things in Lilsan? Fine, with vacation and everything. And dad gets back from Lebanon in a week. Won't that be great, Hilda? Yes, I'm looking forward to it. That's actually why I'm calling. It is. That means Anne is expressing surprise, or she's asking, "Oh, that's why you're calling?" Okay, yes. I think he's landing at Kastrup around 5 p.m. on Saturday, the 23rd. Will you be in Copenhagen then? So Anne is saying, "I think so. I was wondering if you could do something for me." Why, of course. It's kind of a special favor. I'm not even sure if it's possible. That's what Sophie is saying, or Hilda is saying, basically. Now you're making me curious. That's what Anne said. Hilda began to describe her plan. She told Anne about the ring binder, about Sophie and Alberto, and all the rest. She had to backtrack several times because either she or Anne were laughing too hard. But when Hilda hung up, her plan was in operation. She would now have to begin some preparations of her own, but there was still plenty of time. Hilda spent the remainder of the afternoon and the evening with her mother. They ended up driving to Christiansand and going to the movies. They felt they had some catching up to do since they had not done anything special the day before. As they drove past the exit to Jevik Airport, a few more pieces of big jigsaw puzzle Hilda was constructing fell into place. It was late before she went to bed that night, but she took the ring binder and read on, basically. Okay. So Sophie is in the binder and Hilda is the one reading. All right. When Sophie slipped out of the den Through the hedge, it was almost 8 o'clock. Her mother was weeding the flower beds by the front door when Sophie appeared. Where did you spring from? Her mom asked. I came through the hedge. Through the hedge? Didn't you know there was a path on the other side? But where have you been, Sophie? This is the second time you've just disappeared without leaving any message. I'm sorry, Mom. It was such a lovely day. I went for a long walk. Her mother rose from the pile of weeds and gave her a severe look. You haven't been with that philosopher again. So she's a little bit concerned. As a matter of fact, I have. I told you he likes going for long walks. But he is coming to the garden party, isn't he? Oh, yes, he's looking forward to it. Me too. I'm counting the days. That's what the mom said. Or whatever. Was there a touch of sharpness in her voice? The mom's voice, to be on the safe side, Sophie said, I'm glad I invited Joanna's parents too. Otherwise, it might be a bit embarrassing. I don't know, but whatever happens, I'm going to have a talk with this Alberto as one adult to another. That's what the mom said. You can borrow my room if you like. I'm sure you'll like him. That's what Sophie. That's another thing. There's a letter for you. There is. It's stamped UN Battalion. It must be from Alberto's brother. It's got to stop, Sophie. So mom is worried about what Alberto is trying to play all these mind games with Sophie, basically, right? So Sophie's brain worked overtime, but in a flash, she hit on a plausible answer. It was as though she was getting inspiration from some guiding spirit. I told Alberto I collect rare postmarks, and brothers also have their uses. Her mother seemed to be reassured. Dinner's in the fridge, she said, in a slightly more amicable tone. Where's the letter? Sophie asked. On top of the fridge. Sophie rushed inside. The envelope was stamped June 15, 1990. She opened it and took out a little note. What matters our creative endless toil when at a snatch oblivion ends the coil? Question mark. So now we are going to get into the meat of what Marx's philosophy is. So what matters our creative endless toil when at a snatch oblivion means um, it's a it's a damnation without any recognition, basically, right? History will not repeat you or remember you, so you are uh, said to be relegated to oblivion. Basically, oblivious means not knowing, right? So nobody knows. Oblivion ends the coil. When at a snatch, oblivion ends the coil. That's what the letter, the note said. Indeed, Sophie had no answer to that question. Before she ate, she put the note in the closet together with all the other stuff she had collected in the past weeks. She would learn soon enough why the question had been asked. The following morning, Joanna came by. After a game of badminton, they got down to planning the philosophical garden party. They needed to have some surprises on hand in case the party flopped at any point. Okay. So when Sophie's mother got home from work, they were still talking about it. Her mother kept saying, Don't worry about what it costs. And she was not being sarcastic. So she wanted to make it a real nice party. Perhaps she was thinking that a philosophical garden party was just what was needed to bring Sophie down to earth again after her many weeks of intensive philosophical studies. Before the evening was over, they had agreed on everything from paper lanterns to a philosophical quiz with a prize. The prize would preferably be a book about philosophy for young people, which is what we are reading, by the way. Anyway, if there was such a thing, right? Now there is such a thing, and we read. Sophie was not sure at all. 2 days before the Midsummer Eve on Thursday, June 21st, Alberto called Sophie again. Sophie, that's what she picked up the phone. And Alberto. Oh, hi, how are you? Very well indeed, thank you. I think I have found an excellent way out. Way out of what? You know what? A way out of the mental captivity we have lived in for too long. That's what Alberto said. Oh, that. But I cannot say a word about the plan before it is set in motion. Would it be too late then? I need to know what I'm involved in. Now you are being naive. All our conversations are being overheard. The most sensible thing would be to say nothing. It is as bad as that, huh? Naturally, my child, the most important things must happen when we are not talking. Oh, we are living our lives in a fictional reality behind the words in a long story. Each single letter is being written on an old portable typewriter by the major. Nothing that is in print can therefore escape his attention. No, I realize that. But how are we going to hide from them? Shh. That's what Alberto said. What? There's something going on between the lines as well. Exactly. That's just where I'm trying to be tricky. With every crafty ruse I know. I get it. That's what Sophie says. But we must make the most of time, both today and tomorrow. On Saturday, the balloon goes up. Can you come over right now? I'm on my way. Okay. So Sophie has decided to talk to Alberto. Sophie fed the birds and fish and found a large lettuce leaf for Govinda. Govinda must be the dog. Right? She opened a can of cat food for Sherekan and put it out in a bowl on the steps as she left. Then she slipped through the hedge and out to the path on the far side. A little way further on, she suddenly caught sight of a spacious desk standing in the midst of the heather. An elderly man was sitting at it, apparently adding up figures. Sophie went over to him and asked his name. Ebenezer Scrooge, he said, poring over his ledgers again. My name is Sophie. You're a businessman, I presume. He nodded, and immensely rich. Not a penny must go to waste. That's why I have to concentrate on my accounts. Why bother? Asked Sophie. Sophie waved and walked on, but she had not gone many yards before she noticed a little girl sitting quite alone under one of the tall trees. She was dressed in rags and looked pale and ill. As Sophie walked by, she thrust her hand into a little bag and pulled out a box of matches. Will you buy some matches? She asked, holding them out to Sophie. Sophie felt in her pockets to see if she had any money with her. Yes, she found a crown. How much are they? 1 crown, actually. Sophie gave the girl the coin and stood there with a box of matches in her hand. You're the first person to buy anything from me over 100 years. Sometimes I starve to death. The other times the frost does away with me. Sophie thought it was perhaps not surprising if the sale of matches was not especially brisk here in the woods. But then she came to think of the businessman she had just passed. There was no reason for the little match girl to die of starvation when she was so wealthy. All right, sir, we are entering into the. It is very slow, but we are getting there. Come here, said Sophie. She took the girl's hand and walked with her back to the rich man. You must see to it that this girl gets a better life, she said. The man glanced up from his paperwork and said, that kind of thing costs money. And I said, not so much as a penny must go to waste. So Sophie said, but it's not fair that you're so rich when this girl is so poor, insisted Sophie. It's unjust. Bah, humbug. Justice only exists between equals. What do you mean by that? I had to work my way up, and it has paid off. Progress, they call it. If you don't help me, I'll die, said that poor girl. The businessman looked up again from his ledgers. Then he threw his quill pen, quill means like a feather, basically, onto the table impatiently. You don't figure in my accounts, so be off with you to the poorhouse, he said. If you don't help me, I'll set fire to the woods, the girl persisted. That brought the man to his feet, but the girl had already struck one of her matches. She held it in a tuft of dry grass, which flared up instantly. The man threw up his arms. God help me, he shouted. The red cock has crowed. The girl looked up at him with a playful smile. You didn't know I was a communist, did you? The next minute, the girl, the businessman, and the desk had disappeared. Sophie was once again standing alone while the flames consumed the dry grass ever more hungrily. It took her a while to put the fire out by stamping on it. Thank goodness. Sophie glanced down at the blackened grass. She was holding a box of matches in her hand. She couldn't have started the fire herself, could she? Of course. When she met Alberto outside the cabin, she told him what had happened. Scrooge was the miserly capitalist in A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. You probably remember the little match girl from the tale by Hans Christian Andersen. So Sophie says, I didn't expect to meet them here in the woods. Why not? Said Alberto. These are no ordinary woods. And now we are going to talk about Karl Marx. Yep. It is most appropriate that you have witnessed an example of the tremendous class struggles of the mid 19th century. But let's go inside. We are a little more protected from the major's interference there inside the cabin. Once again, they sat at the little table by the window facing the lake. Sophie could still feel all over her body how she had experienced the little lake after having drunk from the blue bottle. Today, both bottles were standing on the mantelpiece. There was a miniature model of a Greek temple on the table. What's that? Asked Sophie. All in good time, my dear, said Alberto. Alberto began to talk. When Kierkegaard went to Berlin in 1841, he might have sat next to Karl Marx at Schelling's lectures. Kierkegaard had written a Master of Arts thesis on Socrates. About the same time, Marx had written a doctoral thesis on Democritus and Epicurus, so the philosophers basically. In other words, on the materialism of antiquity. They thus had both staked out the course of their own philosophies. So Sophie is asking, because Kierkegaard became an existentialist and Marx became a materialist. So Alberto is saying Marx became what is known as a historical materialist. But we'll come back to that. Go on. Each on his own way, each in his own way, both Kierkegaard and Marx took Hegel's philosophy as their point of departure. Both were influenced by Hegel's mode of thought, but both rejected his world spirit or his idealism. It was probably too high flown for them, said Sophie. Definitely. In general, we usually say that the era of the great philosophical systems ended with Hegel. After him, philosophy took a new direction. Instead of great speculative systems, we had what we call an existential philosophy or a philosophy of action. This is what this was what Marx meant when he observed that until now, philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point is to change it. These words, so what he's saying is it's not about looking at the world in various ways, but the point is that you got to change the world, basically. That's what Marx said. These words mark a significant, so it's the job of the philosopher not to just observe the world, not to just what do you call look at the world in a different point of view, but to actually change it. These words mark a significant turning point in the history of philosophy. After meeting Scrooge and the little match girl, I have no problem understanding what Marx meant. Absolutely. Marx's thinking had a practical or political objective. Of course it did. He was not only a philosopher, he was a historian, a sociologist, and an economist. And he was a forerunner in all these areas, asked Sophie. Certainly, no other philosopher had greater significance for practical politics. On the other hand, we must be wary of identifying everything that calls itself Marxism with Marx's own thinking. It is said of Marx that he only became a Marxist in the mid 1840s, but even after that, he could at times feel it necessary to assert that he was not a Marxist. So, Sikshakar, please let me know when you are ready to read. I'll find a nice point to sort of hand it off to you.
Yes, sir. I'm ready, sir. You let me know, sir.
I will let you know. Probably by the end of this page, I'll read one more page. Was Jesus a Christian? That too, of course, is debatable.
Wonderful question, sir.
Alberto, of course, it is a wonderful question. All these are superb questions, basically. Yeah, right? Was Marx a Marxist? He himself stated that he's not, I believe. And again, was Jesus a Christian? We know, at least I know because I have some background. Right? Yeah. That too, of course, is debatable, said Alberto. Carry on, said Sophie. Right from the start, his friend and colleague Frederick Engels, yes, contributed to what was subsequently known as Marxism. In our own century, Lenin, Stalin, Mao, and many others also made their contribution to Marxism or Marxism hyphen Leninism. Okay, so we have a politician in the Delhi area called Marlena, right? Atishi Marlena.
Yes, sir.
She gets her name from these two greats of the world history, right? Marxism.
Absolutely.
From Marx, she gets the Mar, and then from Lenin, she gets the Len, and then the name is Marlena, basically. Anyway, sidebar. I suggest that we try to stick to Marx himself. You said he was a historical materialist, said Sophie. So Alberto is saying he was not a philosophical materialist like the atomists of antiquity, nor did he advocate the mechanical materialism of the 17th and 18th centuries. But he thought that, to a great extent, it was the material factors in society which determined the way we think. Material factors of that nature have certainly been decisive for historical development. That was quite different from Hegel's world spirit, said Sophie. Hegel had pointed out that historical development is driven by tension between opposites, which is then resolved by a sudden change. Marx developed this idea further, but according to Marx, Hegel was standing on his head. Not all the time, I hope, said Sophie. Hegel called the force that drives history forward world spirit or world reason. This Marx claimed is upside down. He wished to show that material changes are the ones that affect history. In quote, spiritual relations do not create material change. It is the other way around. Material change creates new spiritual relations. Marx particularly emphasized that it was the economic forces in the society that created change and thus drove history forward. So on this channel, we started reading this book called The History of Economics, right, by John Kenneth Galbraith. At some point, we'll get back to reading it, but the economic history is documented to a large extent. And I also do believe that it has a big impact on the world history. Whether it drives the history forward is a different level of conversation, but it does have an impact. So Sophie is asking, do you have an example? Antiquities, philosophy, and science were purely theoretical in purpose. Nobody was particularly interested in putting new discoveries into practice. So Sophie is now confused, basically. Right? She says they weren't. So Alberto is further elaborating. That was because of the way the economic life of the community was organized. Production was mainly based on slave labor. Mark this point. So the citizens had no need to increase production with practical innovation. This is an example of how material relations help to effect philosophical reflection in society. So Sophie is saying, yes, I see. Marx called these material, economic, and social relations the basis of society. The way a society thinks, what kind of political institutions there are, which laws it has, and not least, what there is of religion, morals, art, philosophy, and science. Marx called societies superstructure, right? So, sir, Dr. Karu, hello. We are not quite there yet, Lal Salam, but we'll get there after this chapter. So, the way a society thinks, what kind of political institutions there are. Um, so, the Marx is saying material, economic, and social relations, the basis of society, right? The way a society thinks, the what kind of political institutions there are, which laws it has, and not least, what there is of religion, morals, art, philosophy, and science. Marx called society's superstructure. Basis and superstructure. See, that's the difference. The basis is economic and social relations, and the superstructure is all these laws, ethics, politics, religion, morals, art, philosophy, etc. Okay. So Sophie is saying basis and superstructure, right? Right? She's asking. And now you perhaps will be good enough to pass me the Greek temple. Okay, so now he is bringing the Greek temple into context. Sophie did so. This is a model of the Parthenon temple on the Acropolis. You have also seen it in real life. On the video, you mean, said Sophie. You can see the
Sir,
construction has a very elegant, I'll give you after this small thing. You can
all right, sir.
see that the construction has a very elegant and elaborate roof. Probably the roof with its front gable is what strikes one first. This is what we call the superstructure. With that, please, Sagaru, thank you.
Right, sir. Right, sir. Thank you very much, sir. But the roof cannot float in thin air. It is supported by the columns. The, the building has very powerful foundations, its basis supporting the entire construction. In the same way, Marx believed that material relations support, so to speak, everything in the way of thoughts and ideas in society. Society's superstructure is, in fact, a reflection of the basis of that society. Are you saying that Plato's theory of ideas is a reflection of vase production and wine growing? Asked Sophie. So, no, it's not that simple. As Marx expressly points out, it is the interactive effect of society's basis on its superstructure. If Marx had rejected this interaction, he would have been a mechanical materialist. But because Marx realized that there was an interactive or dialectic relation between basis and superstructure, we say that he is a dialectical materialist. By the way, you may care to note that Plato was neither a potter nor a wine grower. All right. Do you have any more to say about the temple? Asked Sophie. Yes, a little. Could you describe the basis of the temple? The columns are standing on a base that consists of three levels or three steps, said Sophie. In the same manner, we will identify three levels in the basis of society. The most basic level is what we may call society's conditions of production. In other words, the natural conditions or resources that are available to society. These are the foundation of